Hello, fellow wanderers, or wanderers of the Wesleyan way, should I say. We had such a great conversation and time of learning last week that I'm really excited about sharing more tomorrow and this coming week as we continue to wander through the important milestone markers that help us better understand our identity as Wesleyans or as people of the United Methodist Church. So we started off as a synopsis, though, because I understand not everybody who wanted to be on the Zoom call could make it. I wanted to give a synopsis of what we talked about last week, and then just kind of a quick teaser about what we're going to talk about tomorrow night. So. And then, of course, this can be used as a refresher for those of you who were with us last week. And it'll be fun to just kind of relive, oh, yeah, that's right, we did talk about that, or oh, yeah, that's right, we did see that. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to play the video and upload it to YouTube like this because of copyright issues that just weren't going to make it conducive for me to do that. So, unfortunately, you just have to listen to me for the next couple of minutes as I give the synopsis. Otherwise, I'd just play the video and say, watch the video and nosh on that a little bit more, but I can't do that. But we did watch a video because I wanted to start our time of wandering by knowing where we came from or where we wandered from in that sense, because it's hard to really look at an identity of who we are if we don't understand where we came from. And so last week was all about exploring and wandering through the history of how did John Wesley and his brother Charles Wesley start this movement in 18th century England, because that is where we come from, is from across the pond, and a movement that started within what was and is the Anglican Church. Because in the video, if you remember, for those who watched it, Wesley's father was an Anglican minister, and eventually John Wesley himself became an Anglican minister and went to Oxford and studied and became, really involved in learning the history of Christianity and studying the gospel and that kind of stuff. But it was in all of those studies that the video reminded us that our movement as Wesleyans is founded in noticing where the gap has existed, or noticing where spiritual deadness has taken claim. And for Wesley in 18th century England, that's what he saw. He saw that the spiritual lives of people in the Anglican Church just were not being fed, and they were not being, there was nothing behind it. There was so little passion, there was so little movement, and the environment, the poor were getting poorer, the rich were getting richer, and Wesley saw gospel-wise that wasn't what we were called to be as Christians. So him and his brother and a gang of other believers and Anglicans decided to start this movement. And of course, as they did, Wesley was very methodical about things and how one would approach that enlightening or waking up of one's faith, with Bible study, with meeting in groups, and that method would then, and studying scripture. And so that would then lead to a revival of spirit and soul. Well, they were given the name Methodist as kind of a tongue-in-cheek from outsiders, people who just kind of scoffed at them and what their movement was about, and said, you're like Methodists. It was kind of like well, Wesley then and his group of misfits, so to speak, embraced that term, and that's how we got the name Methodist, by the way. But it was all out of a response of absolute spiritual destitution that Wesley had seen in the land. So we are people who respond. That is part of our DNA. The other thing about the Methodist movement is that it landed in Wesley's heart, and because he kept trying to study scripture and really try to bring people alive, but he struggled with his own faith. And there was a point where Wesley, in hearing the scripture about God's love, that his heart was awakened, and he felt this like aliveness, this burning in his his soul and in his heart and his being. And so we are people of passion. So we're a people of a movement that was created out of a need, and we are a people of passion. And I think sometimes as Methodists now, we as Wesleyans, when we wander the Wesleyan way, we forget about that. We forget that, we come out of a very evangelical background as Wesley and his brother and the followers of the Wesleyan movement sought to help reform 18th century England, reaching out, trying to transform the systems of poverty, lifting people out of despair, and in doing so, teaching them about God's love. And as Northern Methodists, we forget that the passion and the evangelical heart that Wesley had is a big part of our identity. So let's see here, what else? Rebellion. So it's not just responding to a need. Our tradition also infuses within it a sense of rebellion, because Wesley was getting more and more frustrated with the Anglican Church and how it was not responding to the needs of the people and to the plight across England at that time. And not just spiritually, but like literally, like people were starving. Hey, sound familiar? Anyway, so he kept getting more and more frustrated that the church wasn't responding, and he was wanting to have more and more people that were rising through these studies, and their hearts were being awakened, and their spirits and their bodies were wanting to follow the heart of God. But there was no place for them to be ordained because it was a movement within the Anglican Church, and there were all these other hoops that people would have had to have followed at that time. Additionally, Wesley was a rebel because, let me finish that thought. So what ended up happening is Wesley and his followers Wesley ordained. He broke away from the Anglican Church, and in that sense, when he started ordaining other followers of this way. And so rebellion is in the core of who we are. And another part of that rebellion was that Wesley did actually appoint women very, very early on in the movement to lead some of the small groups and the society meetings. He encouraged women to be leaders. And that at that time was just unheard of. And so embedded in our tradition, in our Wesleyan way, is that rebellion that looks at all of God's children and says we are all worthy to be proclaimers and procurers of God's love in this world. So that's the synopsis, history-wise, and I would love to share more tomorrow night, just as if folks who are new are joining us, we can talk about that more before we start. But now that we have wandered backwards in that sense to learn where we wandered from, we're going to move forward now and look at a very core theological, don't be scared by that word, by the way, but a core theological fountain that continues to feed us as Wesleyans. That is a big part of our heritage that was derived from Wesley and these first Methodists, and how we get to carry that forward, and how important it is in establishing us as United Methodists and Wesleyans in general, because it's unique to us. So if you want to learn what that unique thing is, tune in tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. You can find the link, obviously, on our Facebook and our website. All right. Look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow night. Bye.